Hello, this is David from DN Cognitive Counseling. Today I got a response from a Brian V, and I want to say thank you very much, Brian, for sending us the response. I like it actually when people have a disagreement or a different point of view. It gives us the ability to have a better discussion, and coming about it from a different point of view at times, you will be able to see and understand new things. Brian writes on the video about the psychology of systemic racism. This is the situation that happens with Amy Cooper and Christian Cooper, no relation, in Central Park, with the video of her calling the police on him after he asks her to leash her dog in an area that dogs are supposed to be leashed. And this is what Brian writes. How about the psychology of Chris Cooper? How's this? Chris Cooper is not a police officer, and he has no authority. Why didn't he just call the police? Here's why. He wants to enforce the rules. He's going to make her do what he wanted her to do. He takes it upon himself to enforce the rules. He is the sole enforcer of the rules. He tells people what to do. He sees someone doing something he doesn't like and he corrects their action. He goes around instructing and controlling other people. It's all about direct control. He uses words, his cell phone, intimidation and fear in an attempt to get a woman alone and vulnerable and do what he wanted her to do. He is self-appointed enforcer of the rules who caused this whole mess because he insisted on controlling her behavior. What? The mighty Chris Cooper speaks and she must obey. He's a control freak and a jerk. Chris Cooper told the woman alone what to do, walk away from it. I want to see a video of him telling a man 6'1", 195 pounds like me what to do. I'd warn him once, and if he asks me again, I'd beat and hard. So Brian, I very much appreciate your perspective, which is basically mind your own business, leave me alone, and don't tell me what to do. And you are well within your prerogative and rights to feel that way about the situation. But I want to give you a different perspective on this. It is true that Chris Cooper is not a police officer. It is true that he could have called the police, and there was a reason why he did not. And I want to go over this a little bit so you understand a little bit the other aspect of this. To say that he has no authority is incorrect also. The question is where do citizens fall in line with things? Where are we as a society when we want certain things to be a certain way? Do we care if people are just ripping up the grass of a park? Do we care if they're breaking the swing sets? Do we care if people are vandalizing other people's property? Do we care if somebody else is attacking somebody? There's a famous story about Kitty Genevieve, who basically was murdered and raped in a courtyard. And it was heard by a bunch of people in this complex. Not one person called the police. It's a psychological phenomenon called diffusion of responsibility. It's not my problem. I don't have to deal with it. I'm sure somebody else is calling. And the rapist came back a second time and then killed her afterwards. It's one of the things you study in psychology classes, and it's to help you to understand that certain people should take a stand. But this line gets wonky. It's not so clear-cut. And at times, people don't understand why people do certain things and what those behaviors are. Now, you may have gone ahead and said, you know something, I don't want to get involved in this, and you have every right not to. But Chris Cooper goes to that place all the time. He actually feels like he's a protector of that area. And despite the fact that you feel like if he wouldn't have told the man the same thing, I don't believe that. There was nothing on that video that was showing to be intimidation or trying to hurt. What he did do was he created an environment where she couldn't control the dog, which is why she almost choked it to death. By creating the dog to get wild by the treats, and what Amy was trying to do is keep the dog calm, she went ahead and created a situation where the dog was trying to jump all over the place. In aspects of psychological control, It's actually Amy Cooper that was the one that was sort of dictating control. And in her apology, she did denote that she was out of line in what she was doing, that the fact that she acknowledged I was breaking the law was the biggest fact there. The worst part is she broke a much bigger law that nothing was followed up with afterwards. But in terms of your ideas about this, about the idea that, it's people shouldn't be doing this, and, we really shouldn't be living in a world where people are getting involved in other people's business, I just want you, Brian, to think about this, because it's very easy when there's a situation that you feel and you have a direct connection to, you go, man, they shouldn't have gotten involved. But I want you to think about the ones here that I'm going to show you. And you tell me, sometimes yes, sometimes no, or sometimes you can have difference of opinion about who should have done what. So I want you to keep that in mind as we go through a couple of examples.
Do not touch her! Do not touch her! She had nothing! Do not touch her!
Leave her alone! Sarah, just walk away! Hey!
Hey! Get off her!
Just get out of here! What? Hey!
So the first video you just saw, a man on a bicycle attempts to stop children from putting up signs in a park. And he gets very angry and frustrated. In fact, he then assaults the person who's taking the video. Now, should they have not been involved? Should they not have tried to protect the children? Should they let the man do just what he wants? The nature by which you say this is my house becomes the question to what you say that you're responsible for. But I want you to think about it another way also. People will get involved in a bunch of different things that they think are important to them. Let's go to another case example.
I can't believe that. Now they circling. See, look. I want you to know this is not. Let me tell you, this is not a black woman who's putting Black Lives Matter. I just want you to know that when. Right, but y'all doing that for us, and we ain't asking you to do that. Listen, don't spray stuff on here when they gonna blame black people for this, and black people didn't do it. But if we want you to do it, we're gonna ask. They not gonna show your face when they see that on their building. They gonna blame that on us. Y'all part of the problem. News come on.
So what do we see in this video? Here's an African American woman who's very deeply upset. Why? Because you have two white women spraying Black Lives Matter, vandalizing property. And she's saying, this is what you're doing to represent us that doesn't represent us. This is where the problems come about. From what I understand, and again, you can't quote me on it, but what I've heard is that the Wendy's was burnt down by a white woman in the situation that took place in Atlanta. That doesn't negate the fact there are people that have different colors doing things that are wrong. What it does do is create the image that certain people are just a certain way. It's not. Everybody is capable of a certain way. And what we don't seem to understand is, in this situation, would you say that these women shouldn't have gotten involved? Should they have said nothing to the white women because it wasn't their business? That they were spraying Black Lives Matter on a building, but it wasn't their building. They had nothing to be involved in that building. They shouldn't have cared about that. But they did, and they cared for a variety of different reasons. And the nature is, here they were screaming at them for what they did. And my guess is the women would have done the same thing if they were men, because they were angry about it based upon the fact that it was a misrepresentation. People do not like that. People don't enjoy when you take the things that they love or the things that they enjoy and they destroy them. You have people right now in Pennsylvania standing guard over monuments that they deem to be important. They didn't put up the monuments. They don't own the monuments. But they say, you know something? This is important to me. I'm standing up. That doesn't make them wrong. You have people that are angry and upset and protesting. That doesn't make them wrong. The nature by which people cross lines makes people wrong. But we have to understand where those lines are. With Christian Cooper, he didn't break any of those lines. He may, Brian, not have done what you liked. He may have gone across an idea about the fact of how dare he get involved. But people get involved with everything all over the place. Let's go to next example.
I'm asking you if this is your property.
Why are you asking?
Because it's private property.
Because it's private property,
So,
sir.
are you invading private property? You're free to respect it.
No, we
But not other people's property.
Okay.
absolutely,
Sure.
just respectfully.
Sure.
So we're just saying, absolutely, your signs and everything, and that's good. This is not the way to do it.
Okay.
It's private property.
But if I did live here and it was my property, this would be absolutely fine.
If it,
And you don't know if I live here or if this is my property.
we actually do know. That's why we're asking.
Oh, really? Because you live here, right? You said so.
Yes, we know the person who does it.
Oh, okay. Then I suggest you call them or call the police, or because you're accusing me of a crime, correct?
What I'm asking you is why.
And I'm not answering you.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
So your choices are to call the cops if you believe I'm calling a crime, and I will more than be happy to talk to them.
Okay, thank you.
What's your name again?
I'm Lisa.
Lisa, what's your last name?
What's your name?
What's your name? I asked her, Lisa. What's your name, sir? What's your last name, sir?
What is your first name, sir?
I'm not asking you. You're talking to me. I'm asking you questions.
Well, we're not doing anything illegal.
Neither am I. Really? Oh, okay, well then, call cops. Lisa and Robert. I'll be right here. Bye.
So, what do you see here? A white couple goes over to a man who's sitting and drawing chalk on his house, in the front of his house, and he's writing what he believes is right. They lie to him about knowing who lives in the house when they don't. They get involved in a situation that, Brian, I think you'd be very clear not to say that they shouldn't have gotten involved in. But people get involved all the time. People do this all the time. To say to Mr. Cooper, you don't have a right, but everybody else does, is a little disingenuous. But Brian, I have to say, I don't necessarily disagree with you about not getting involved in certain things. I don't walk around getting involved in everybody else's business. But people have a right to. There are people that care about things, and they have a right to stand up when it's in their legal right to do that in a legal fashion, a legal way. You might not agree, but you're going to find that there are certain things you will agree with where you will stand up for things. Another case in point.
Trying to leave so I can leave and go about my business. How do I make a wrong turn into a gated neighborhood? I need to have a gate code in order to get in, right? That's common sense, right? So if I'm in here, I had a gate code, right? That's none of your business. Yet again, it sure as hell isn't. I'm not in the wrong. I don't know who this is. What's your name? Uh-huh. I'm in the wrong. Show me your badge then. Uh-huh. What you got?
You do realize this is all private property.
You do realize this is unlawful detainment, right? You have absolutely no reason and no right to hold me here to block me in with your car. You don't need to know anything. The private property that you own is probably somewhere up there.
I own 1/18th of what you're sitting on. This street is private.
1/18th of what I'm sitting on.
City property. This street is maintained by the people that live in here.
Mm-hmm.
This is private.
And apparently one of the people that live here gave me a gate code. You're not helping me. You're being nosy. That's all you're doing. You're trying to use privilege and you're not getting it from me. You can apologize too. It wasn't your fault, sir. I don't understand what his need or purpose was for doing that. Normally, I probably could have handled it a little different, a little better, but emotionally, I got a lot of things going on.
And here you have another situation. People getting involved where they don't belong. And whether or not they were looking for safety, whether or not they were just worried to do this to anybody, whether or not it was racial, these are all questions that come up. But the situation here is people get involved in things they don't belong in. And here was a situation, by the way, Brian, going to your point, was an older white man taking on a very much bigger African-American man. And he wasn't intimidated. Because when people get this way, they're not worried about it. In the situation before, she was with her husband, but she was the one that was the one instigating it, not the husband. I think the idea of thinking that what happened there is this isolated incident that never happens is naive about human behavior and the way that people actually interact with one another. And how many people do this continually. And, of course, we're not done. Because there are more of these cases, and they get crazier and crazier.
In the backseat with me. I'm babysitting. There's this lady across the street. We just came to Subway and Walmart. This lady over here, she's following me.
A Georgia man says a woman called the police on him for babysitting. Corey Lewis says it started when a stranger confronted him to ask about the children he was looking after that day.
She then pulls up around to the car and she asks, "Are the kids all right?" And I said, "Why wouldn't they be?" And she just kind of gave like a shoulder shrug, and she had like a smirk on her face. And so she left. And then she came back and she said, "Can I speak to the little girl and ask her if she knows who you are?" I said, "No."
Lewis says the woman wouldn't leave him alone. He started recording her actions on Facebook Live after he says she threatened to take down his license plate number and call the police.
This lady followed me home. Look, I'm about to pull up to the crib and let my mom handle this one time. Look. She followed me.
Lewis says shortly after he pulled up to his residence, a police car showed up.
What's up, man?
I'm being followed and harassed. That's what's up.
The officer questioned the children, who confirmed they were safe. Aside from the inconvenience, Lewis, who runs an after-school program, says he was upset that someone would think he could harm a child.
What really had my emotions going was the fact that, there's this random lady who was trying to assassinate my character based on...
I think, Brian, you could actually see how this would be hurtful and affect people's lives. And the nature that people make these judgments go back and forth all the time. But I did find somebody that would agree with you, who agreed with the sentiment that you have about the idea about minding your own business. And again, you may very well agree with this.
So I was about to pull off, and these two white guys got dropped off in my neighborhood, right? They're in an all-black neighborhood, and these are two young white guys in the middle of COVID-19 just got dropped off. What I'm not going to do is get out of my car and ask them why are they in my neighborhood. What I'm not going to do is follow them around and find out why are they in my neighborhood. What I'm not going to do is call the police on them because they look suspicious. Two white guys dropped off in my subdivision where no white people live to walk around in the middle of the subdivision in the middle of the day during COVID-19. It's strange, but I'm not going to follow these white men around my subdivision. I'm not going to call the police on them, and I'm not going to harass them because they have a right to walk on the sidewalk in the subdivision. They have a right to be here. The same way black people have a right to be on sidewalks or walk through streets or run through neighborhoods or do any of those other things. You see how that works, white people? People can come into your subdivision or into a neighborhood or a park or an apartment building or an office building or a gym or any damn where else and do whatever it is they came to do without you bothering them. The same way we do to you every single day. Do good. Seek justice.
So again, I think, Brian, that I think that you agree with that sentiment, and you have every right to. You also have a right to be vigilant and to look. You have a right to be able to ask questions and be able to see. Because the only way we ever, when it came to terrorism, it was when you see something, say something. So there's a lot of conflicting messages. What would be if somebody was being, in a situation where somebody was being kidnapped? So you're not going to say anything because you see something? Now, I do have a sense that a lot of these situations, there was other ways to see whether or not something was wrong besides just assuming it based upon the factors that were used. But the nature of what was going on here and the factor that we're seeing is a lot of people get involved in a lot of other people's business. Most of the time, well, I can't say most, some of the time where they don't belong. Some of the time they might. With the Christian Cooper, whether you agree or disagree, he absolutely was within his right. He absolutely had a personal invested interest in that area. He personally had dealt with this many a time. And for all you know, Brian, he dealt with it with 6'9", 250-pound white males who would go ahead and sit and have a shout down with him. You have no idea, and I wouldn't make the assumption that just because he was well-spoken and spoke that way, that he wouldn't step up. For all I know, he could be an MMA fighter for all I know. What I'm saying is, people have an idea about stepping up for themselves, about things they care about. He stepped up. She was doing something wrong. And instead of just acknowledging it and saying, okay, you're right, I'm sorry, click, it wasn't. Her ego got in the way. It was her ego, her emotional state, that's the one that changed, not his. She was the one trying to stop him from filming her, not the other way around. You'll notice in all these filming situations, nobody's trying to stop anybody from filming. You want to film? Go right ahead. I'm going to film too. You're going to film? Beautiful. You film, I film, we film. Everybody's filming because everybody's looking my point of view. Amy was upset about the filming. Why? Because she recognized and understood she was doing something wrong. She recognized and understood that there was a problem with that. And instead of just acquiescing, she didn't want to give in. Those are the differences, Brian. I hope that this is a little bit of a different perspective. And again, if you have a right to disagree, you can think I'm absolutely wrong. And I welcome that. If you think that I'm wrong and this doesn't mean anything and everything I'm saying here doesn't make a point to you, you have every right to say that. But I hope that you'll take in some of it and think about it and say, you know something, maybe there's a valid point somewhere. Maybe there was something that you missed maybe before or didn't understand totally. Because I do understand your point of view. I do understand, as I said, the last video I played of the African-American man saying, listen, I'm not getting involved. I don't care. These guys could be drugs and do whatever they want. Just, it's not my business. And he has every right to that attitude. He doesn't need to get involved. Had he gotten involved, that necessarily would not have been necessarily wrong. It might have not been the thing you want. But as you see, there are people that will get involved and the way that they feel is important. I hope that you like this video and I hope that you hit like. If you dislike it, please tell me why. Like Brian, step up and tell me why. And again, Brian, thank you very much for your response. It was well thought out, well presented, and I do appreciate that. And again, if you didn't subscribe to the channel, please do. And if you'd like to make and become a patron to this endeavor and challenge, please go to the Subscribe-star button beneath and click that as well. I wish you a good night and good mental health.